Good morning. My name is Jim Fergal, and I will be your presenter today. I am a Job Seeker Services and Veteran Services Manager for WorkNet DuPage, as well as the facilitator for the job club that we hold twice a month, normally on the second and last Friday of the month. I thought it would be appropriate nowadays to have a topic about finding opportunity in the midst of chaos. And that's why we've gone to online, virtual. So WorkNet DuPage is a job training organization funded by the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or as some people like to call us, WIOA. And I put our website down, worknetdupage.org, so that you can go there and look at the various services that we offer. Everything from job search to, especially now, we have a lot of job training opportunities, especially with the COVID-19 layoffs. So I would encourage you to go to our website, go to the job seeker side. You will see all the different opportunities that we have. We will be doing various virtual job clubs in the future, hopefully every Friday. I've just done a virtual interviewing recorded that should be open for the public. So please take advantage of our services. I've put everyone on mute so that I can continue with this. I am limited on time. So if you wish to have any questions, please write them in the chat box, and then I will answer them. So let's look at the spider and the fly, because we want to look at what's normal and what's abnormal. Normal for the spider is every morning it builds its web to catch its food. That's normal. Every day the fly goes around bouncing from object to object looking for its food. Well, one day the fly winds up caught in a spider web. Now, for the spider, that is normal because now it has dinner. For the fly, that is not normal. That is called chaos because the fly is trying to struggle to get free, and his whole day or her whole day has been thrown out of whack. So, the other day I was flipping through the TV and I saw my favorite Monk episode, The Detective. And he's going on a date with someone, and she looks at him and says, "You don't like change very much." And he says, "Well, I don't mind change. I just don't want to be around when it happens." And I believe that's with most of us. Because right now, with the pandemic and the economy and everything, that's change and that's chaos. Our normal day a month ago is totally different than what our normal day is now. So how do you deal with change? Well, what we have to look at is most people, like me, sometimes, most of us, this is where all great stories are written, we want to run away from change. Our daily activities have totally been wiped out. Now, the other thing is that you have people who accept change. Those are few and far between. But I think we have to look at what are the different types of change. And I believe there are two. One is change that we initiate, that we control. You decide you want to plant a garden. You decide you want to go on an exercise routine. You want to read a book. You have the motivation, you have the energy, that's where you want to go. So that's one type of change. The other type of change is change we have no control over. This is from external events or people uh, that impact us with change. So again, we look at the economy, layoffs, restructuring, the pandemic. Now you can't even, a friend of mine owns a bar. You can't even go to a bar. One, you can't smoke in it. Now you can't even drink in it because you're not allowed out of your house. So that is the other part of change. And when we look at this, when the winds of change blow, some people build walls. But what the presentation today is going to be about is how do we break through these walls and build windmills? And I am amazed at the amount of people that I read about or hear about on the news that are building windmills. With change, what we have is the biggest obstacle, because it's like a maze that you're going through. The biggest obstacle is ourselves on how we deal with this. And I believe that when you look at change, there's a Bermuda Triangle. And in that triangle is fear, resistance, and rationalization. First off, we fear change, especially if we haven't initiated it, because it changes everything. It's fear of the unknown. We can't predict what the future is going to be. Myself, everyone I know, when a job is on the line or when you're conducting a job search, you know, you're like, well, should I take this position? And there's a certain element of risk involved. And the interesting thing is, you got to take a risk. I'm reminded of Captain Kirk on Star Trek. He told Sulu, if you want to sit in that captain's chair, you got to be able to take risks because risk is the name of the game. So you have to act in spite of your fear. But also, which comes along with fear, is called resistance. This is your instinct of you want to run away. You don't want to adapt to the changing situation. And you put up barriers in your way of taking positive action. And this is called rationalization. If you decide you're going to start an exercise program, well, you know, the first step is the hardest, getting out of the house. But then it's like, okay, it's too nice out, you know, it's too hot, it's too cold, I'm too tired. Those are all things called rationalization. In the job search, rationalization is, I'm not going to look for a job today because there aren't any out there because everyone's laying off. So, is everybody laying off? Not necessarily. The economy has definitely changed, but let's look at what's inside your head. Yes, but. I've talked with job seekers. I've even watched After One Job Club. One of the speakers and myself were working with an individual, providing some suggestions, and he kept going, yes, but. And the rationalization was, but I've already tried that, it doesn't work, you know, all sorts of things like that. If only is another form of resistance. If only they hadn't laid me off, if only the economy gets better, if only this pandemic ends, if only things could go back to the way they were. It's not going to go back the way it was. There's an old adage that says you can never walk into the same river twice. It's constantly changing. I can't do this. I don't have the skills. I see this so much. Well, maybe we can help you get those skills. Yet at the same time, people will hire you. What happens in my mind is when you're working, you're totally confident of yourself. And once you get laid off, rather than looking for the 98 things that you have, you look at the 2 things you don't have. They become like a focus point for you. And that again becomes resistance and rationalization of why, which brings us to the next one. No one will hire me because I have too much education, not enough education, I'm overqualified, I'm underqualified, I'm too old, I'm too young. All of these are rationalizations, and I would go so far as generalizations. So I learned something in social studies in high school, and the teacher said to us, all generalizations are false, including this one. So when you come down here and say, no one will hire me, there are no jobs, well, if there's 30 million employers out there, does that mean all 30 million of them will not hire you? You have to look at this. You have to change your perspective. And I'm not saying it's easy out there right now. You know, my son just got furloughed yesterday. My physical therapist for my knee surgery, he just got furloughed. Yeah, reality is out there. So take advantage of this time to build yourself up, to get ready to either go back to work where you were before or to find a new position. Now, when you're in the job search, there's a tendency to look in our rear view mirror for our last job. Why is that? Because it's familiar. We know what it was. You know, even I've looked for my last jobs, but the problem is they don't exist. And you have to look forward to what opportunities are out there. One of the things I've learned, and I've been through 7 or 8 layoffs within a 10-year time period, definitely a 5-year time period was 6 or 7, is that all jobs are temporary and all jobs are training ground for the future. So where you at today, all of your experiences, all of your education, all of your training has brought you to today, and that is what you have to offer an employer. So the old workplace is dead. All righty. Look at, you know, when I go online and all the different companies that are offering virtual training, everyone's adapted to this new economy. The work environment where you work has changed. I mean, gosh, look at here. They had, you know, hundreds of people sitting at desks. And then we went to Prairie Dog Town or Cubicle City. Then we went to open offices again. And now we're virtual. Some of you are watching this on your phone right now. Think of that. You can do a Skype meeting or you can do an interview on your phone. You can do a presentation off your phone. It's amazing. And you can work from anywhere now. Alvin Tolfer, in his book Future Shock, said the illiterates of the 21st century are not those who can't read or write, but those who can't learn, unlearn, and relearn. I was laughing with my our social media person, and in the last 2.5 to 3 weeks, I've learned Uber conferencing, Microsoft Teams, how to video conference, to doing Zoom now, and next week we'll be using Skype for Business. And that's all within 3 weeks, learning new programs and just jumping in and having to do them. We have to continually learn and adapt. The rate of change is increasing exponentially. The amount of knowledge out there doubles, sometimes triples every year. You look on the internet, you can get overwhelmed by the amount of information and the people out there, and there's e-learning. There's different types of learning now, and lifelong learning is what's important. There's certification training, which we help pay for. Micro degrees, colleges are going to micro degrees now, not to mention the degrees and licenses. If you're a professional and hold a license, there's a lot of continuing ed classes that you have to take in order to keep your license. I have a friend who's a neurosurgeon, and he told me he goes to a minimum of 3 conferences per year so that he can keep current in the latest and greatest in surgery. So I was presenting at a conference years ago, and one of the workshops that I attended was a presentation on the chaos theory of careers. And what they said was rigid career tracks nowadays are hard to predict. If you look at, I have dry spaghetti there. And if you have dry spaghetti and drop it on the floor from, say, 6 feet or out of a cabinet, it breaks, okay? So what you have to look at, and what I look at, is careers now are like cooked spaghetti. It's over, under, around, and through. There's lateral movements. And careers are affected by the complexity of the workplace, the amount of change that goes on there, and chance. As an example, if you're bouncing a tennis ball on a table, it pretty much goes back into your hand. Now, if you have a puppy in the room and you're doing that, what happens? Chances are that puppy's going to jump up on the table. It's not always going to go back in your hand. Let's open up a window with some of the winds that we've had lately and the puppy. Is that ball going to bounce directly back up into your hand? Probably not. These are all things that affect. So right now, your career can be affected at changes in the company, the ways of doing business, the economy, and now the virtual reality. So my recommendation now is for structure. Working out of the house, I thought, gosh, this is going to be crazy for me. But I make a plan every day. I have certain things that I do before turning on my computer, and I make sure my computer is on and up and running by 8 o'clock. Now, I'm working. The majority of you are not. But I recommend you develop a plan for yourself. And if you have been off for a significant period of time, maybe look at readjusting your plan. We do have a tendency to become complacent. Schedule your day, schedule the week, schedule the month. This gives you things to go for, things to plan for. I don't care if it's taking something to the cleaners, going to the grocery store, talking to a friend. Hopefully when the economy's up and running, people will be going back to events again and restaurants. Plan all these. These are good events for you to talk to people. You know, take this opportunity now to research yourself, look at trends in the marketplace, industries, companies. I'm going to give you lists of resources that you can use to find out what's going on out there. Schedule your time on the internet. Boy, you can get lost on here and hours go by, especially if you're in the job search mode. You can get overwhelmed by information. I'd like to say that some applications are real easy, and there's some applications that are going to take you a couple hours, especially now that there are applicant tracking systems. There's applicant tracking systems out there, and they're looking through resumes, and they can't, your resume may not go through if it has text boxes. These are all things we talk about. The talking points, your networking, you can do that anytime, anywhere, with anyone. But now, because we're all locked in, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, these are all adequate platforms to use for social media. Your telephone, you know, like I just mentioned, you can do so many things on your telephone now. There's different types of interviews. There are informational interviews, first, second, third interviews. My younger son interviewed just as the lockdowns were starting. He was supposed to go to San Diego, and that all fell through when California went into lockdown. So all of his interview process and all of his onboarding and all of his training have been done through Zoom or Skype for Business. Take the time to figure out what's the difference between your wants and needs. Tangibles, intangibles, company car, company computer, or salary and vacation. Follow up with people after your interviews. Follow up with people for support. Follow up for networking. One of the things I find, and when I talk with other recruiters or other trainers or other people, is when they make a referral and the person doesn't take advantage of that referral. And it's just like, wow, I just let you use my name for a very key contact and you haven't taken advantage. Follow up. So let's focus on the benefit of hiring you. It's not that you want a job. We know that. That's guaranteed, okay? We all want jobs. But you can't go into an employer and when they ask you, why do you want to work here? Well, because I need a job. That's not going to do it. You have to talk in their language. And you have problem solver or profit maker. These are the two things that employers are looking for. I have a problem and I want to be making money. That's why you're hired. Everyone from an admin assistant to a sales rep, warehouse worker, accountant, vice president of operations, to the CEO. Look in the past for clues for the future. I did the exercise from What Color's Your Parachute, the flower exercise, where you wrote out 7 or 10 stories about events in your life that you're most proud of. Notice I didn't say work, I said your life. Everything from grade school, high school, college, different types of work, different types of activities, team activities, concerts that you might have performed at, teams you've played on, work that you've gotten awards for, anything like that. And you write out the story from beginning to end. And then in What Color's Your Parachute, he has a list of skills that you identify which skills were used in which stories. You have job skills, personality skills, transferable skills. And what Color's Your Parachute does is it helps you prioritize these skills so that you can come up with your top 10 skills. This is the pattern that you have used in your life. When you look at every time you've been successful, you have used the same 10 skills over and over again. And that is your guide for the future. You use those skills, you carry them on interviews to ask questions about whether you're going to be using those skills. If you like talking to people and they're going to have you data entry all day, probably not going to be a good fit. Or vice versa, if you like data entry and they're going to put you on the reception desk talking to people, not going to be a good fit. So you want to make sure that the position fits with you and you fit with the position. Another good way to find out about what you're great at are moments of flow. This is what I call timelessness. When you start something, if I'm putting together a PowerPoint, and especially as I'm trying to finalize it, maybe 2 days before the presentation, time just flies by. It's hours, and before I know it, it's, wow, I started at 9 and now it's 11:30. What happened to time? It's the same thing that goes to hobbies, athletic events, anything. Look back in your life and identify those times of flow. How did you feel while that was going on? That's important to look back and see and feel the experience. I remember going to an Anthony Robbins seminar and he was doing visualization with us. You know, think about a great event, maybe your wedding or first child, or you won first place or something. And you visualize the sun and it's nice and warm. And when you visualize the sun disappearing, it becomes cold. But he also talks about what does it feel like when it's warm, you know, when it's shining on you. What was that moment like? So when you're down in the dumps, and I know for me, when I'm down in the dumps, I'm not looking at my accomplishments, I'm looking at my failures. And I literally have to hit myself upside the head to say, whoa, wait a second, let's change that perspective to look at what have you done that's fantastic. When you're looking at your work history, what did you like or dislike about the positions or the events, things like that? And what have you learned? Now, I've had some jobs I hated. Sundays were horrible for me, but I look at, wow, I've learned some things. I learned cold calling by selling insurance, by doing recruiting. I learned to get organized in recruiting. picking up the phone, overcoming fears of the phone. These are all things I learned, even though the jobs were that I hated it. So as you're looking in your past, you look at your family. When did you start a family? Divorces come in, kids, all this stuff. What did your parents do? Your life stage of where you at? Are you just entering the workplace? Are you in the tail end of work and career? What are your talents? Talents, those are kind of hard for us to identify because they come so naturally. Ask other people. What skills have you developed over time? What are your interests? What do you do when you don't have to work? What are you reading? What are you working on? Take some personality assessments. Not that you should use personality assessments to divine what you're supposed to do, but they have found that certain personalities gravitate towards certain occupations. What's your vision? What type of position do you want? How do you want to see your life? Visualize this. Make a vision board for yourself. It's interesting once you start visualizing and making things concrete, how close they come to you. What are your goals? And when you connect the dots for all this, you now have a constellation. And the Big Dipper up in the sky leads to, those two stars lead to your North Star. This is what guides you. Think about this. Do you like helping people? Do you like designing products to make life easier? Whatever it is, this is your motivator. And there's a lot of times you go through life searching for this, but if you do the exercises, look back in your life, look at these experiences, you will start to identify what is your North Star. The clouds, the fog start to disappear, and the star becomes brighter. Now, change. The next thing can happen while you're holding on to the old moldy one. You know, it's so true. We're holding on to our past. We're holding on to our old jobs. We're holding on to old titles. Well, we have to look at, that's all changed, especially nowadays. And when we go back to work, I think it's going to change some more. Now, is your job search reactive or proactive? Reactive means you're sitting on the internet, which I guess we have to do somewhat today, but really waiting for positions to become available on Monster, Career Builder, Dice, whatever platform you're using. And what happens is you are looking in the last place the employers are looking. They're trying to fill positions from people they know or their current employees. So that's why you want to be proactive. I go back to what are the trends, what's happening in your industry, because that's where the opportunities are going to be. Now, one of the things I do is I like casting, making metal soldiers. And I just want to use this as an example of what's happening in the economy and with your career. So I have a block of metal, we'll call it the old economy, and I put it in a pot and use fire, charcoal to melt it down. The fire is the disruption. These are the factors that are disrupting the economy today. We have technology, global economy. I mean, look at the global economy of how this pandemic started in China and went through the world. We're all connected now. The demographics, the rise of the machines, the rate of change, these giant organizations. But I want to say something here. When I melt the metal down, on top of the metal, I have to scrape off the impurities, which are called slag. And this is a time of testing for you, preparation, and training, learning. And so what you have to do is get rid of the impurities in your head and change your perspective to be poured into the new mold of what's the new economy. Because that's going to change. Here you were a block, now you're melted down through these disruptive factors. You're poured into a new mold and you're transformed into something different. Our economy has transformed. Cybersecurity, data analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning. Look at all the advances. They were talking 12 to 18 months before a vaccine is being found. And now we're looking at, gosh, they're inventing test sets in incredible times. They're even working on vaccines. I mean, all this stuff is happening because of crisis, going back to the disruptive factors. So opportunity is becoming available as well. So let's look at what's on the horizon. I found this quote, and I've used it in several presentations. I've had several job seekers tell me how much it changed their whole way of looking at the job search. The voyage of discovery is not about seeking new landscapes. It is about seeing with new eyes. Change your perspective. Look at where the opportunities are in sea and space, artificial intelligence, manufacturing, bioengineering. Look at how they're building the masks. Look at how they're coming up with the tests. Big data, how it's being used, all of this. If you can think of how can I get into these areas, because that's where the future is going to be. Someone asked if this presentation is going to be recorded. It will be on our website. So here's a list of just some recommended reading for the future. These are all free websites, I believe. This UI Labs, digital manufacturing, they identified over 165 new jobs. You got supply chain. You have A to Z databases and Reference USA that you can use. I'm gathering most libraries are closed and we can't get into A to Z, but when you do, you can research companies. I like reading the Business Ledger and Cranes. There's an article in Cranes, April 6th, about a bunch of engineers laid off from US Robotics and Motorola that formed their own thing. And now they're like top of the line in product design. And it lists the company, lists the employees. Industry Week is good if you want to find out about manufacturing, supply chain. Tech Republic has a lot of things on Zoom now. Workforce.com, HR. The one thing I learned in recruiting during one of my layoffs from unemployment during a recession of all things was the guy told me there are always opportunities, even in the middle of recession. And when you read the papers or read the news or listen, look at new companies, new products, companies that are expanding, management changes, winning contracts. This is why I like the Business Ledger. This is like Cranes. A lot of times with the Business Ledger, they interview presidents or CEOs, and they find that, wow, we're expanding up until a month ago. Look at what the opportunity is. What's the opportunity out here? What are you willing to change? Can you envision something that's better? And of course, you're going to need risk. People get stuck not because they're too dreamy, but just because they're too cautious. I was reading an article on American Machinist where Lockheed Martin hired 1,000 people in the last 2 weeks, and they still have 4,000 people to hire. Talked to a recruiter friend of mine, his open job orders have gone down. So it's a mixed bag. Look at where the opportunities are. Change your perspective. I want to finish up with talking about the need for struggle. If you think about a caterpillar, caterpillars go into a cocoon and isolate themselves. And while they're in the cocoon, they're training, they're developing, they're changing. You're in a cocoon right now. And someone did an experiment where they saw this butterfly, or caterpillar / butterfly, trying to get out of the cocoon. And they thought, you know what, I'm going to help it. I'm going to take a little razor, open up the cocoon, and make life easy for the butterfly. What happened was the butterfly never flew because it needed struggle to build the muscles in its wings so it could fly. This is why there's struggle. And I really hope that through the struggle, you learn to fly and take advantage of the opportunities that are out there to find out who you are, find opportunities in the economy, and find out how you can be a benefit to a company and society as a whole. Now, again, my name is Jim Fertile with WorkNet DuPage. Go to worknetdupage.org. Our next presentation will be next Friday, and it'll be April 17th starting at 9 a.m. Okay. Are there any questions? Check for open positions on WorkNet DuPage. There's, if you Google healthcare jobs, jobs in the healthcare field, I'm trying to remember, there was a career counselor site that was listing all these. You can go to our website. The presentation will be on there. Yes, next week we'll be preparing your interview stories. I'll take you step by step of how to prepare a story about your accomplishments. And any other questions or comments? I'm happy you were able to attend. And I would just like to say to everyone, keep your head up. It's tough on everyone. What do they say on TV? You're home alone, but we're all in this together. This Zoom that we had today was limited to, it was 40, then it went up to 100. Our Skype next week will be open to even more people, and I think I will have more time. I wanted to talk more about different issues here, but next week I will be able to take my time and really thoroughly go through interview stories with you. Okay, thank you.